Welcome to Association Chat, an online discussion where we warm ourselves by the virtual fire with topics of the day, welcoming thought leaders and trailblazers alike to join up in this online home for the community. I'm the host of Association Chat, Kiki L'Italienne, and on today's show, we are talking with Mary Byers and Harrison Coerver, co-authors of the book Race for Relevance. Race for Relevance. Now, if you are familiar with this book, you should be, because it's been around for a little bit, but here is the big addition. They have updated it. They have given us a new version. It's the 10-year anniversary. It's an update after the book's been out for 10 years, and some things have changed, right? Some things have changed in the past 10 years. So I'm going to ask Harrison and Mary to join me and talk a little bit about the race for relevance and what it means for associations today, and what these big radical changes that they're talking about that associations need to make, what those changes really are. So with that, let me go ahead and welcome you, Harrison and Mary. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I want to go ahead and get started and talk a little bit about the pandemic. It is very difficult to think about talking about anything these days without bringing up the obvious, that the pandemic is here. Associations of all types have been grappling with what that means, and what that means for their industries, what that means for their members, what that means for running the association itself. So I want to go ahead and pose this question. I'll start with you, Harrison. In working with associations during the pandemic, what observations did you make regarding governance functioning?
Well, if you look at the decisions that had to be made during the pandemic, I think almost everyone would agree that our full boards were not in the decision-making chair during the pandemic. That because of the urgency and the scale of some of the decisions that had to be made, canceling meetings, renegotiating contracts, working from home, uh, moving meetings and programs online, a lot of those had to be made very quickly. And so what it showed us, it kind of exposed some of the flaws of governance that we identified in the book. And so if you look at where those decisions were made, uh, I think almost all of them were made either by officers. In a lot of cases, it was the CEO and the chair that had to make the call, and the boards were informed after the fact. So I think the observation we made was basically it was more of same that the pandemic really exposed the fact that our boards are larger than they need to be, and that and it's not just the pandemic. There are other dynamics with large groups that we really have to reconcile ourselves with.
Well, and I think that's a really important point to make, because these boards, they can be the source of real power and the source of a lot of oh gosh, what's the best, most diplomatic way that I can put this? They can be a source of some issues. Let's just put it that way. And a lot of times when you have these larger boards, and they can get quite large, I liked that you brought up trust in the book and how that has a role to play. Mary, I see you nodding your head. Would you like to say a few words about that?
Absolutely. Harrison and I have both been in boardrooms, and you may well have too, where it's a huge table set, dozens and dozens of people in the boardroom. And we've heard people say, I'd like to echo the gentleman who just spoke before me. Sorry, I don't know your name. And you think about being in a room full of people and not even knowing their names. How can people feel free to speak up and feel like it's a safe environment if they don't even really know who's at the table. So a huge board finds it more difficult to build trust more quickly. And that's one of the reasons and we've stayed by this too. In the original book, we said these smaller groups, that psychologists tell us that smaller groups are able to make decisions more quickly and everybody has more buy-in. There's no social loafing. If there's only 7 or 12 people around the table and you know each other well because you're serving together in leadership well, it's easier to build trust than it is if you have dozens of people. And that's not even just how many people are on the board. We've been in boardrooms where all of the past presidents are sitting behind board members, and board members know that all the past presidents are there, or that members of the nominating committee are there to see what kind of statements they make or what kind of decisions they make. And we have new research in the book that shows it's easier to build trust in a smaller environment. And so that's really one of the reasons. And that's a new element, frankly, in this anniversary edition.
I was wondering about that. I saw that piece, and trust is a real hot topic for me. And so, I really was drawn to that part of it. And I wanted to ask, what did make you think about adding that and being something that was brought into this edition? Because, I think we can say that we've seen a lot of trust issues that have manifested in the world around us, certainly in the past several years. And so did that have a role to play? What made you think? Was that a Harrison decision or a Mary decision? How did that go?
I think it was both the best decision.
I was going to say, if you think it was a good idea, it was mine. And if not, it's Mary's. I've used that all the time. Oh, Mary wrote that part. Let me just, we got a lot of pushback by, advocating for a 5-member board. That was really a kind of a provocative concept. And we knew that. But what it made us do in the second edition was to kind of double down on it and do some additional research. And it was really telling. And to cut to the chase, when you look at group dynamics and size, first of all, it has been studied extensively. There are professors at Harvard and Wharton that have been studying group dynamics and team dynamics for 30, 40 years. And so this is not exactly a new body of knowledge. And there are, related to that trust, there are 3 things that take place when groups get larger. Number 1, people contribute less. This goes back to Ringelmann over 100 years ago with his rope experiment. The more people you put on pulling a rope, the less each person was pulling. So if you want to, if you have to understand that every time you add somebody to a group or a team, everybody is going to contribute less. Second piece is that if you add people to a group, the number of relationships or interactions that they have to manage goes up exponentially. So even in a board with only 10 or 12 people, you're talking about I can't remember the exact number, but multiple interactions that people have to manage. And I remember an exec telling me years ago who went on a board and said, I never thought about this, but how many relationships on a board can I manage? How many people can I really get to know? And as Mary said, and trust. And then finally, the third piece with the groups as they get larger is that their communication and coordination overhead goes up. So you spend more time organizing, coordinating, communicating than doing actual work. So those were the 3 things that we found when we dug in and did the research to really throw some more support behind our concept.
I think that's one of the benefits of having an opportunity to do an anniversary edition is we were able to go through and add to some of our previous work, and we're grateful for the opportunity. We were also grateful to see, quite honestly, that much of the, if not all, of the first edition really stood the test of time. The things that we added, which was a huge percentage, are new case studies and some new data and new research. But essentially, the challenges facing associations are the same, and the recommendations we make as a result of that are the same.
I'm trying to, everyone who's watching this live, please appreciate that I'm trying to juggle the mics and to make sure that we're muted and unmuted at just the right time. So, I can appreciate the fact that the core information that you had in the book, it's withstood the test of time. And then there are these pieces that have made it in, that have said, hey, this is now what we need to pay attention to. This is now what you need to pay attention to, associations, if you're going to navigate into the future in the best way that you can. One thing that I think is a core truth that you can say has been around for a really, really long time for associations is this idea of membership organizations believing that the key to adding value is increasing the number of services, increasing the numbers of benefits and programs. But yet, that's not always the way to go, is it? So I kicked it off with Harrison first last time. Mary, can I go to you for this one? All right.
So we in the first book, we summarized it by saying we believe that more things, more stuff, more benefits equals more value. But if the value only appeals to a very, very small part of the association membership, then it really isn't valuable. And we cite the Pareto principle, where the 80-20 rule, where 80% of value comes from 20% of programs and services. If you ask most associations what that 20% is, or what really drives membership, most of them can't answer that question. And if you can answer that question, then we would just ask, why keep the other 80%? You should be staffing around what has the highest value. And we know that members are attracted to excellence. So rather than trying to do a lot of things with mediocrity, let's really focus on the few things. I have a great example of this. I'm working with a client right now. They were started as a federation of state societies to focus on advocacy. That was their core purpose. That remains their sole purpose. But they are in the process now of looking at what they can add to add value. And the reality is they're a small organization and a small staff. And as they start adding new things, they're actually going to diffuse what their value is, and they're going to get away from their core purpose. And in so doing, they're going to start to lose their value. But it is a temptation. It's the bright, shiny object syndrome. What else is there that we could do or add?
Harrison, did you have anything to add to that?
I think that associations need to look at the consequences of trying to do too much. And the typical association is trying to do too much. And if you look at it, first of all, it's a competitive disadvantage, because if your competitor is focused solely on selling insurance, for example, and you're an association that's in the insurance business, in the advocacy business, in the education business, and the information business, and the networking business, you're trying to juggle 8 balls, and your competitor is sitting there focused on one. And the second thing that we have to think through is the impact on our communications. And if you're focused on a single area or a narrow area, your ability to communicate is going to be more effective. And a lot of times we hear execs or volunteer leaders talking about, oh, the people just don't know what we're doing. They don't understand all we're doing for them. They don't understand the scope of the benefits that we have. And the problem is that list of benefits is the thing that is resulting in the inability to communicate. You can't possibly communicate all those things. All you have to do is look at a website of a typical association to see what the downsides of a over extended product line is. And I think we find, and other things that people say is, well, we don't want to have all our eggs in one basket. So What I'm going to say is that, I want you to kind of go through a drill with me and say, I want to list the top 10 things that you do for your members. What are your top 10 benefits or services? And then I want you to rank them from number 1 to number 10. And then I want you to take number 1 and 2 off the list and say, how do you look without those two? And I think 99% of associations say we're in real trouble if you take those two away from us. So we have our eggs in one basket. The other 8 eggs aren't doing us any good and won't sustain us. So we just have to be more disciplined about how we manage our product lines.
Well, and the topic of product lines is definitely something that has been brought up a lot over the past year and a half. I think as we've seen, the annual meetings and trade shows and, all of these different things that associations, a lot of them had a large piece of their revenue sort of revolving around the expectation that they would have these large events. Um, you know, uh, Not to get too far in the weeds, because I know the focus of our conversation today is the book itself. But what have you been hearing from your clients that you've been working with about this particular part of it? Because I know that there's been a lot of pushback on whether they should just wait and try to see if things even out, or shift their revenue models and try to diversify. I know I'm veering us a little bit off course, but I'm actually really, really curious to hear what each of you has heard from your clients. So, Mary, can I go to you now? Yeah.
I'll start off.
Okay.
The need to diversify revenue has been around for many, many years, even, pre-pandemic for sure. But you are absolutely right. The pandemic, or as I like to call it, the pandamit, has accelerated. It just makes me feel better to call it that. The pandemic has accelerated a lot of the trends that were already in play. And so several of the clients that I work with, 70% of their revenue came from their convention or their trade show.
Hmm.
They knew that it was dangerous to be that dependent. And now they know without an absolute doubt that it was dangerous to be dependent. Thankfully, many of them had started down the road of trying to diversify their revenue. Some of them just hadn't quite gotten far enough down the road. But now it's not just a nice to, now it's a have to. We see without a doubt. But at the same time, Kiki, and this is something that I'm just totally fascinated about, and it's going to get me on a soapbox.
Yeah.
I've also seen associations that were very proud of the fact that they didn't have to dip into their reserves.
Hmm.
But if reserves were for a rainy day and we didn't use them in a rainy day, and this was a tsunami, then why are we saving this money? So I see boards that want to diversify revenue, but they don't want to have to spend any money to be
Hmm.
able to make money through diversified revenue streams. And that is just a fallacy. And it really puts the staff, it paints them in a corner to say to them, go create new revenue. We're not going to give you any more staffing. We're not going to give you any financial resources, but you go make it happen. It's just not realistic.
Yeah. Harrison, do you have anything to say to that?
Not really much to add.
Yeah.
Your original question was, is the model going to change significantly as a result of the pandemic? And immediately everybody's reaction is, well, we're going to have hybrid models for our meetings. And my guess is, yes, that's probably going to be the case. But it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. Um, I think that it has put all our meetings and all our events under a lot of scrutiny. And I think the longer that this goes, the more concerning it can be, because okay, we didn't have the trade show last year, but our business doesn't seem to reflect any negative impact of that. Uh, but now we go and we have to cancel a second year, and these companies and members are shifting their marketing spend because they still need to get to their consumers, their customers, but they don't have that trade show opportunity. So they're investing in alternatives that could be a very negative trend for associations.
Yeah, I have to admit I've seen similar where there have been some, by the way. I don't want to paint like this is the bleakest
Yeah.
picture because I'm sure we've all seen some good examples where associations have early on they were trying to figure out how to adapt and what they could do to mitigate some of the financial burdens that they were going to be facing because of what the pandemic brought with it. But I think there were so many that were just really hoping that this would pass by for this first year to the point where if they could get through the first year, then things would sort of go back to normal. And when it started looking like it might be that way when everyone was getting vaccinated, and the case numbers were going down, I mean, I definitely saw this big push for everything to kind of go back into that direction. And thankfully, we don't. I actually had an organizer, association event organizer say, this will be our last hybrid meeting. We're going to go all in person after this. Thank God we don't have to do any more virtual. And then and then the surge happened with Delta, right? And so it certainly has been food for thought on how associations that were holding out maybe just really have to bite the bullet and start thinking about new ways.
I think, Mary's going to want to weigh in on this because she's got good, strong points of view on it. But I think we both agree that it would be a real mistake to take an attitude of saying, how quickly can we get back to the way it was?
Yeah.
That in our opinion, the pandemic showed that we had significantly underestimated the acceptance level of technology. Okay, now they didn't have a choice, they didn't have an option, they were forced into it. But the fact of the matter is that associations have done some incredible things with technology. And, I'm sure you've heard stories like this, but a group out in California uh, talking about how they used to bring in their key members from their constituents. And this is an organization with thousands of members. But anyway, they were getting, 120, 125 people to come to Sacramento for their legislative updates, et cetera. And when they had to take that virtual, that number shot up to 800 or 900 that they were able to reach. So my question to that group would be, okay, let me ask you a question. Do you want to go back to being able to engage 125, or are you more are you happier with your ability to reach 900? But I'll turn it over to Mary because this is something that she's given a lot of thought to.
He knows this is a hot button for me. I'm advising clients not to use the words go back. Mm-hmm. Instead, substitute go forward. So instead of going back to normal, and what is normal anyway, mm-hmm. plan on a go forward strategy. The reality is that the pandemic accelerated things that were already happening, but it has provided a tailwind for us as well. I mean, Kiki, I'm sure you're seeing clients that got 8 or 12, 800 or 1,200 members at their meeting who suddenly had 5,000 worldwide. So, we've talked about being global and we've talked about going international, and we've only been able to do that incrementally in most cases. And now all of a sudden, we have the opportunity to do it quickly, almost overnight. We are resilient. We've learned new skills. We've had to do it under stress, but let's don't lose what we've learned. Let's don't lose the new opportunities we have. Let's double down on taking all that stress, all that learning curve, and let's put it into a go forward strategy. Because the reality is, as stressful and difficult as the pandemic has been, it has also offered us a tailwind, and it's taught us that we can do things we didn't even know we knew how to do or needed to know how to do. So I prefer to look on the bright side. And part of the reason I think we need to do that is if we don't capitalize on that, then we are ignoring the huge loss of life and the huge disruption and the huge stress that has happened worldwide. And going back is almost pretending like none of this happened. And it obviously did.
Yeah, I'm repeating a little bit what Mary said, but I think associations would agree that they did things that they didn't think they could do in the last 2 years. Well, we're going to have to do our board meetings all virtual. Oh, we can't do that, or
Mm-hmm.
we're going to have to change the meetings to webinars. And I think they found, I think we had to say, look what we were able to do. Look what we were able to do in the last 18 months. And what does that mean going forward? And the other thing that these are the kind of, not much keeps me awake at night. I sleep pretty well. But the one thing that I've been thinking about is the fact that this pandemic has resulted in billions of dollars of increased sales by the big technology players. And even the smaller ones have had extraordinary success, and they've been extremely profitable. So let me ask you a question. What do you think they're going to do? They are going to plow those profits back into new innovations and to new digital services and new digital opportunities. And so if we go back, we are going to be going in exactly the opposite direction the rest of the world is going in, is they are going to double down and say, holy smokes, look at what we were able to do. How do we do more of that? How do we explore other opportunities to exploit using these digital opportunities?
Yeah, well said. I think both you and Mary really raised some important points about this moving forward idea because, whenever I think about all of the change that we've gone through as a society, and it's one thing really after another. It's not just in one area, but it's everything from how we meet, how we communicate, how we work, how we educate our children, how we shop, I mean, all of these different parts of our lives have required us to think, is this the way that we should really be doing this now? Is there a better way? And by the way, as you all well know, when people change their processes over time, they're changing their behaviors, they're changing their habits, they're changing their expectations. And those changed expectations means it's just a whole new game. We can't imagine that we can assume that the old ways that we were doing things will meet people's expectations for how we should be doing them now. And so I absolutely, I'm right there with you. And this whole focus on technology, everyone was asking about what should we do with digital first before, but I feel like maybe now there's more of an urgency behind it. So, I mean, what are some of the obstacles that are actually, there for associations when they look at creating a digital first strategy? Say they've been dragging their heels through this, what are some of the obstacles?
I'll start with that because Kiki, I want to touch on something that you just said. And I think Harrison and I agree that one of the underestimated aspects of the association environment today is the underestimating competition. And you said that you hit the nail on the head with as habits change, as our news sources change, as our content consumption habits change, as our education habits change. That is upending things for associations. So that competitive, and a lot of times when we ask associations, who are your competitors, they won't name other associations. But if there are other associations who are offering what you offer or muscling in on your space, as one of my clients called it last week, and they are doing things better digitally than you are, that's going to be a competitive advantage for them and a reason for members to go to them instead of sticking with you. So we have to be really, really honest about competition and what it's doing to us. As far as the digital first mindset, I think some of the obstacles are, we assume, or boards assume, are money. And again,
Mhm.
they may have millions in reserves, but they don't want to touch it. So they cry, poor us, poor me, we don't have enough money. So finances are part of it. Expertise is part of it. You may not have the internal staff expertise that you need, but it's easier than ever to find outside partners who can actually help you with this. Some of it, frankly, is intimidation on
Mhm.
behalf of the board and or staff. We don't know what digital first means, and we don't know how to find it, we don't know how to do it, and how are we going to have the time to do it because we have all these other things to do. So I think there's an intimidation. I think there is a little bit of inertia
Mhm.
that comes into play. So all of those things working together make it more comfortable to stay where we are or just to plod along. But the reality is that many groups need to leapfrog. They need to make huge digital investments just to even get even with where they should be now. Forget what the plan is going forward. And Harrison and I both know of associations that are spending in the double digits, percentage wise, to get themselves where they need to be, just to even get to the point of having a stable digital environment before they can start using some of the new things like artificial intelligence and sentiment analysis and the things that are coming down the pike, data analytics that are really going to help us. And the other thing I'll say before I let Harrison hop in here is we always think of digital as costing, but we're seeing associations that are actually using a digital environment as revenue, or digital
Mhm.
information and data as revenue streams, revenue providers for the association. So part of that digital first mindset is, what do we need to know? But the other piece of it is getting the mind around the fact that it actually can be a revenue driver and not just always a revenue drainer.
I love that. Harrison?
Kind of hard to add to that. Mary kind of hit the 6 or 7 challenges that are there. Other than that, it's easy. Um, I think the thing that I focus on a little bit is the fact that our members are all different, our associations are all different, but one thing that our members have in common is that they are all consumers. And as consumers, they are seeing how technology has just revolutionized retailing, where today Amazon is bigger than Walmart,
Yeah.
that how it has changed banking, how it's changed virtually every aspect of our lives. Bear with me just for a second because we had a washer and dryer delivered yesterday.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
If you would have told me this a couple of years ago, I would have just fallen off my chair. But so this is not a big company, it's a local appliance store. Sends my wife a link. And what the link is the to their delivery system. You are number 7 for delivery today. Uh, Here's the map. Here's where the delivery truck is. He's on number 2. Your delivery is now 12:30. Well, then he got behind, and so he's on delivery number 4. He's going to be there at half an hour later or whatever. I was just blew my mind. I said, "Do you know how more efficient they are with their delivery with that little piece of technology? It's just amazing." So, our members are being wowed by people like my little appliance dealer, and they're looking at the association that's dragging their feet and behind in the digital space, going, "What is their problem? Why can't they get on the program?"
Yeah. I mean, I see it too. I think that, you know, a big focus of mine is always community and how people come together. And of course, with associations, the big joke is associations associate. That's what associations do. And it's just, I think that I've had I've been encouraged by seeing how well associations that are known for being risk averse and taking forever to change, how well many of them have done things like encourage these different types of online interaction between their members. But I've been discouraged by the way that there doesn't seem to be this overarching plan for how to keep that ongoing so that members who don't connect it at in-person events can better connect in other ways throughout the year. And I look at the crossroads between technology, digital first, and everything that we're talking about in the way that society is shifting and the important work that our associations do. And I think, gosh, I mean, if they have to solve that problem, they need to solve that problem. So I guess what I'm really trying to say is I'm thankful that you talk about the importance of, building that digital framework in as one of your 5 radical changes that associations need to make, because I have to say I don't see it in not, I won't say most of them, but I'll say I don't see it in many. I don't see it in many.
No, I think you're right. And unfortunately, I got to tell you, if you want a shortcut to irrelevance, just ignore the technology and
Yeah.
deny the digital trend, and you're gonna be on the fast track to irrelevance.
Yeah, if it's easier for you to make a connection with your delivery driver for your washer than it is for another member of an association you belong to, then there's a problem, right?
Yep.
So anyway,
Kiki, I think kind of what you're suggesting is that rather than having big touches just a couple of times a year, we think about how we can have smaller, more frequent touches with members throughout the year. And that gets to your whole connection piece of it, because then the association is part of my life on a weekly basis, a monthly basis. If I'm going to a conference once a year, and that's the only time around conference time that I'm connected, then the value isn't the same for me. But if I'm tapped in, or I know where I can go find, in fact, this just happened today. I'm a member of an association and I needed the name of an app that I had heard discussed in one of our forums, and I was going to text somebody, and then I thought all I have to do is go to the online community and do a search. And within 15 seconds, I was able to say to a client, here's the name of the app. I have colleagues that have tried this app. I think it's worth looking at. So that association helped me help my clients. And I think that's what we're helping our members do, is help their clients, their customers, whatever they call them. So I think that is an incredible piece of it. And I think the other piece of it that you're getting at is this whole idea, this unwillingness to make some investments. I think part of it is the risk tolerance.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
don't generally, it's a small percentage of associations that have a high level of risk tolerance.
That's unfortunately very true, as we all as we all know. I do have hope, though. I won't lie. I mean, I'm a bit of a Pollyanna, and when I look at something like this book and the fact that there are certain things that remain true, we know that associations, that a lot of them are doing such important work, that trust piece is you can really, I think over the past few years, the number of, you might have more competitors in other areas, but for competition on trusted, information, trusted connections, trusted research, I mean, that's really dwindling, so I feel like that's an area in which associations can maybe, leverage that. And I think that if they look at maybe doubling down in some of the areas in which they'll have the most impact and that will mean the most to their members, basically, if they follow your 5 radical changes, they should do really well. So I guess I'm going to ask you for some final words. If you could give, just one piece of advice to an association executive who is listening to this, they haven't read the book, but they're probably going to order it after this, and they're saying, Harrison, I just want to focus on one thing over the next few months that will help me to get my association where it needs to go. What would you tell them?
Get your board right.
Get your board right.
It's all going to start there. You're without board support, you're not going to have a digital first. initiative. Without board support, you're not going to be able to rationalize your product line and get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to, if I were, I mean, you asked, I'd say the first thing that you got to focus on is making sure that your governance is the best it can be. And that means that it gets down to size as a factor in governance performance. But I think being more intentional about composition is equally or maybe more important. That too many associations are still in a model where they kind of say, who all wants to be on the board, and they don't take a proactive approach of saying, here are the challenges that we're going to have, and here are the opportunities that we're going to have. What kind of board members do we need that can help us capitalize on those opportunities or meet those challenges? And so I always kind of challenge my clients or association execs and say, think about the dream team. If you've been an exec for 10 or 15 years, and you could go back and selectively pick the best 5 or 6 board members that you've dealt with over your period of time, what could you accomplish if you could put that team together to support and work with you in directing the organization? So I don't think there's any question in my mind that if you don't get your board right, it's going to be hard to execute anywhere along the lines, and there's plenty of things that you're going to have to execute on in the future.
So Mary, I'm going to turn the question over to you and say that I'm an association executive, head of an association. I'm coming to you, and I said, I heard everything Harrison just said, but I need to hear your voice, Mary. Do you have any words of advice for me?
I would echo what Harrison said on getting the board right, but I also know that for some organizations, that's a longer process than others. Most governance initiatives take anywhere from 18 months to 2 years. So if I was going to give advice on just one thing that would make a difference, I think our association professionals need to spend some quiet time thinking about strategy, thinking about what's next, thinking about the best way to implement what they read in the book or what they're hearing from peers in terms of knowing what they need to do. So my advice would be to set aside some time that is uninterrupted, no meetings, no email, away from the computer if you possibly can, and just spend some thinking and planning and strategizing time, whether that is an hour each week, whether it's a half a day each week or a day each month. Make it a habit and invest in that thinking time on a regular basis, because the execs who are really doing well are the ones that are actually ahead of the board in terms of direction and where they need to be going. So get your board right, but as you're getting your board right, take time to invest in your own thinking time, because I think that personal strategy time is extremely important, frankly, to the health of associations everywhere.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I love that answer. I love both of your answers. They were fabulous. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for taking the time to, talk with the audience. And I have to say, what did you think? I thought those were excellent answers. I definitely agree that you should think about your boards, think about taking some time to just really process what is going on in the world around you, what questions might be out there on the table for you to answer, and really, what is the best next step that you can take to lead your organizations in the future? Mary and Harrison knocked it out of the park. I knew they would. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you got a lot out of the interview today. If you want to reach out to them, please do reach out to them, but also buy the book. Buy the book, because I promise you it has a lot of helpful information in it. It's actually a really great read, and I enjoyed going through it. I took notes. I've used it in a lot of my different conversations I've had with association executives. And if you want to become a Patreon patron of Association Chat and support this good work that I do, then please just visit patreon.com/association chat. And thank you. As always, I hope you learned something of value today that's going to help you in your career, in your life. And until next time, everyone, keep asking questions to learn every day. Because as Joseph Campbell once said, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Have a great rest of the week, everyone.